First of all, it's an honor, really an honor, to have here David Curtis with us. Professor David Curtis studied medicine at the University of Cambridge and Middlesex Hospital Medical School. He specialized in psychiatry at University College Hospital and started his research career in psychiatric genetics in St. Mary's Hospital. In 1994, he was appointed Professor of Psychiatry at the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience. In 2002, he was appointed Honorary Professor at Barts at the London School of Medicine and Dentistry. Lately, in 2011, he was again appointed at the University College of London. He's currently an Honorary Professor at the Institute of Genetics at University College London. Am I right? Did I miss something? Well, I've probably missed a lot of things, but it's just a short presentation. And now, a ver si me encuentro. Perdón. So, David, do you have something to tell us before I make you some questions?
I'll listen to your questions.
Have you enjoyed?
I'll answer your questions. That's great. Oh, sorry. Well, I would very much like to. I very much appreciate being invited to be here. I think your description of me is a bit too flattering. So it's an honour for me to be invited here, and I'm being very struck by the work that ViveLibre is doing. Very impressed with that. I worked for 30 years as a clinical psychiatrist, and I think the attitude, the way that the company is seeking to support people with disabilities, to empower them, I'm very impressed with that, and I'm very glad to be part of that endeavour.
Yeah, this is something we didn't have 20 years ago. So
I think the people have been trying to do this sort of thing for a long time, but what the ability to implement it with new technology is very impressive.
Yeah, and so you've been, actually that was a question I wanted to ask you, because you have a long and successful clinical career, and now you have decided to centralize your activity in research.
Yes, I mean, I was doing research alongside my clinical activity, and now I'm doing the research full time. And clinical activity is rewarding. You as a doctor, you meet hundreds of people and you try to do something that will help them. Sometimes you help them a lot, sometimes you help them a little bit. With research, potentially, although one makes a very small contribution to knowledge, potentially it can affect many thousands, many more people than one can touch kind of individually. And I think also there's a sense of kind of progress, of moving things forward. If you're a doctor and you meet a patient and they're ill, they get better or they don't get better, but then another patient comes along and another patient comes along and the world never changes. Whereas if you're doing research, then even if you make a small impact, even if you find that something doesn't work, at least you add that to the amount of human knowledge, and the world always goes forwards in scientific research. So it's great to be able to participate in that.
Actually, I was saying 20 years ago we didn't have these things, and you couldn't enjoy these advances in medicine, and now you are working for us to have more things, specifically in genomics, but more tools, more knowledge, and that's what you're pointed at right now. You're focused.
Yeah, I mean, medicine has been advancing for the last century. I mean, things are very different now from when I qualified, and there have always been advances, and people have contributed to those. I'll tell you something personal. So when I was a child, I had quite bad asthma. And when you have asthma, you can't breathe. It feels terrible. And then you have this spray, and you suddenly feel great again. And even as a child, I knew that somewhere there was some scientist had made this stuff that was, could transform my experience of life. So I'm kind of personally aware of the contribution that medical science can make to people's lives, and that's been going on for a long time, and it will carry on going on for a long time. We're here now trying to make the best of the technology that we have available to us now.
And here you are giving us your knowledge and your experience based on clinical practice. And in your words, which are the more important advances in the fields of genetics and mental health that you have approached?
Genetics and mental health. I mean, the thing that I think is really the biggest. There are a couple of things I would mention, but I would say that what's happened with Alzheimer's disease is really striking. Here you have a disease which is incredibly common. Could affect one person in 20. That's millions of people just in my country, in your country, where we had no idea what was going wrong, and it's very, very difficult to understand what's going wrong inside the brain. To do tests, we can do scans from outside, but understanding what's actually happening and what the problem is has been very difficult. And really, over the last 20 years, genetics research in Alzheimer's disease has really told us what is happening to the brain in Alzheimer's disease, why it stops working. And it's told us there's this protein called amyloid precursor protein, and there's a gene. The gene which makes this protein is called APP, and if there is a mistake, one little change in the APP gene, then it makes bad protein, and then the bad protein, the amyloid precursor protein, is laid down in the brain cells. It destroys the brain cells gradually, and people get Alzheimer's disease. And we've seen that if there are mistakes in the genes which code for the enzymes which digest that protein, then you can get Alzheimer's disease. And more genetic research is coming through now, showing again and again that what causes Alzheimer's disease is something going wrong with this protein accumulating in the brain and then destroying brain cells. And we know that now, and we didn't know that before. We could not have known that without that genetics. And it means that then we can look at those processes, those enzymes, what's driving them, what the possibilities are to introduce new drug treatments. And as I speak now, there is maybe half a dozen drug treatments at fairly advanced stages of testing, any one of which might mean that we just never see Alzheimer's disease again. We are standing maybe on the threshold of a world where in 20 years' time people don't have Alzheimer's disease anymore. And it's just extraordinary.
20 years?
Well, the drugs are in development now. Things take time, but I mean, it could be sooner. I'm trying not to be too
I was thinking
crazy.
It was a short time.
It might be a short time, but I don't want to be. There'll be other people here who would be less optimistic than me, and I don't want to. I don't want people coming out of the conference saying that Dave Curtis said Alzheimer's disease has been cured. No Alzheimer's. But this process is happening.
That's what
and the drugs today may not work, but in 5 years' time there might be some that do, and so on and so on. But our understanding of the disease is transformed. So that's I think very big. Now, other advances, we hopefully starting to see that just at the beginning of that stage with schizophrenia, where the first genetic abnormalities which can cause schizophrenia are now being identified. And then with intellectual disability and the ability to sequence the whole human genome, I mean, it's just extraordinary. This is totally new, the last 2 or 3 years, that one can just routinely take a blood sample and then routinely just get all 3,000 million bases, DNA bases, and say, there's this mistake in this one, this base is wrong, and that's why this person has got this it might be very severe disability. So that is new technology, and it's happening now. And although it's difficult to get treatments from that, at least we're today in the position that we can give explanations to people that a couple of years ago we could not have done. So there are very big changes happening.
That's where we are going, but it's happening right now, and it's very interesting what you are saying about explaining to people what's happening there. Sometimes it's peaceful to know what's happening, not to have an explanation, and to know why you feel like that, or why are you, or why is your grandma or your father losing memory or has any impairments, and in particular in schizophrenia as well, no? Knowing that you do have those things, and you are explaining the whole molecular process of the disease around your research, right? And then we're talking about diagnosis in particular in neurodevelopmental problems, developmental problems in dementia and in brain damage in general. You're talking about diagnosis. I'd like you to be more specific about if it really helps to give a diagnosis, and what would you think the future will be, or the impacts of genomics also in treatment of those diseases?
Well, I do have something to say about that. I was asked this earlier, and I think when people talk about genes and psychiatric genetics, and they think that what we're going to do is to change the genes and to do gene therapy. Now, you can do gene therapy on white blood cells. You can take blood cells out, you can change them, you can put them back in, you can fix them, and you can cure some illnesses like that. You can do gene therapy in the retina of the eye. You can get genes in and prevent blindness. But we're not talking, I don't think we're talking about gene therapy for diseases of the brain. The brain is dense, there are billions of neurons in it, and we're not talking about that. What we're talking about is using the genetics to understand what's gone wrong and then use that to inform better treatment strategies, whether it's a new drug, whether it's a kind of psychotherapy, transcranial magnetic stimulation, to understand more about what's happening and then to be able to do something about it. But it isn't, I think, mostly about changing genes.
So we're talking more over understanding the disease and giving some tips to know what kind of treatment is better for one or another disease. So that's it. It has an impact on treatment, and not about genetic treatment or mother cells or whatever. But yes, it has an impact on treatment right now.
Well, not on treatment, not for brain disease now. So now for cancer. Cancer is a brilliant example where they can take the genetic sequence of the cancer cell, they can see what's specifically wrong, and then they can give a treatment that will work for that person's cancer. Now, we're not seeing that today for brain diseases or disabilities, but I was at a conference in Barcelona last month, and it's fairly convincing that you can identify two different kinds of autism, for example, from genetics. And then there's the hope that maybe this kind of autism might do well with this treatment, and this kind of autism might do well with this treatment. Now I want to say this is hope, only hope now, and a lot of people are making claims for personalised medicine, and we can do this and we can do that, and it's not here now, and we're hoping it might be here someday, but it's not unrealistic to hope that if we get a better characterization of one person's individual problems and why they've got this disease, which looks to us the same as that person's disease, but actually genetically is quite different, then maybe we can do a better job of giving that person the right treatment which works better for them, causes less problems for them, and this person the other treatment.
And it gives you lines of research. These lines. Very nice. This is very interesting. Sometimes I get lost with genetics. It's a world. It's a real world itself. So thank you so much, David, for helping us understand a little bit the genes and the genes in mental health, which is a world really. Thank you. Our next invited is Manuel Pérez-Alonso. Good morning, Manuel.
Good morning.
Manuel was already with us in the last edition of Futuro Singular. Mm-hmm. Thank you for repeating.
Thank you.
We highly appreciate that you joined us again. Manuel holds a PhD in biology and is a real expert in genomics. He is also in the academic world, and he's as the director of the Institute of Genomics for Genomic and Medicine of Valencia. Manuel, seeing your profile, you'd say that you're a multifaceted man with lots of different interests, and that you do work on them. You try to get your interest on your life. And on one side, you have a scientific mind, a real scientific mind, very scientific, but you have an academic heart, clearly. And finally, you have an entrepreneur spirit.
That's right.
In which of these three fields where you usually work every day, in which one do you feel most comfortable?
Well, that's a good question. Well, first of all, thank you for the presentation and thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I would say that I'm divided in three parts. On one side, I feel myself as a scientist, trying to contribute, making science and generating knowledge. On the other side, as you say, because of my link to the university as a lecturer in genetics and genomics, I like very much the contact with the students, especially in the last years, the contact with medical students who receive education related with genetics and genomics. But finally, this last part, maybe this is the entrepreneurial side. This is where I feel most comfortable, because I feel that an entrepreneur is a person who does not like the situation, who believes that something can be done, and that's what was in my head when I decided to create the first company. That was almost 20 years ago, and then later on some other companies with the idea of filling the gap between the knowledge that we generate and the practical use of this knowledge for developing diagnostic tests or understanding how to approach to the development of new drugs.
Mm-hmm. So you feel comfortable in the three of them, but entrepreneuring is something that you think is needed.
I would say that, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Why genetics? Mm-hmm. Why genetics?
Why genetics? Yeah, that's a good question. Look, I had a very good opportunity of having very good teachers when I started my studies at the university. Indeed, I was mentioning this professor who unfortunately died recently. I was mentioning him. His name was Professor José Luis Mensua. He was a very good teacher in genetics, and he showed what was known about genetics, especially molecular genetics, 30 years ago. And for me, it was such a very good experience that he moved the development of interest in this area. And since then, I was enthusiastic about working in genetics and genomics, because the word genomics did not exist 30 years ago, but what was going to be genomics, so to approach the DNA information, the content of information, and how to make use of all that in the benefit of society.
What would you say is the difference between what we call genetics 20 years ago or 30 years ago and we call genomics right now?
All right. Well, we understand the term genetics as the study of genes, and normally we associate this concept as the study of individual genes. We study the gene that is responsible of certain characteristic that we see in humans, like color of eyes or the color of skin or whatever characteristic related with health, not only physical characteristics. So normally genetics till a few years ago was studied with individual genes. That was the kind of tools that we had in our hands. But with the development of the new methods of sequencing that allow us, as Dr. Curtis mentioned, to sequence the complete genome, then we are able to analyze simultaneously all the human genes. And when we deal with such kind of information, a huge amount of information, then we call it genomics, although the basic concepts are the same.
Thank you, Alex. I think there can be people who doesn't know the difference. Thank you for explaining that for us. We are seeing, and we have focused on technology in the first part of the event, and we have seen that the technology development is causing a deep transformation on all human activity, not only in medicine but in their lives. And this is occurring particularly in health sciences. As a result, experts predict that a new paradigm will emerge, in which, among other things, it will take place a greater emphasis on the diagnosis process. Will genomics be the key to the process of diagnosis in the future?
I believe this will be the case. It seems that genomics will allow us to offer the possibility of making this kind of test, genetic tests or genomic tests, not only for patients who go to a medical doctor with a disease or a suspected disease, but also that will be available for healthy people who just want to take care of themselves, to know about what kind of habits could they have to have their lives, what kind of food they would be best, what kind of exercise is best for their health. So there are so many things that we expect that our lives will be changed out of that, so that we can say that genomics indeed can be the basis for a radical transformation of our lives.
Okay, so we are talking about personalized medicine, and now we are talking about personalized healthcare.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And how about those caseloads difficult to diagnose, the enfermedades raras, no? These illnesses that are very infrequent, but they're causing so much suffer. And could we say that there will be one technique that could help us to diagnose all of them or many of them?
We expect that it will be like that. And I must say that despite the area of genetics and genomics is developing very quickly, we still do not know what are the genes that are causing so many thousands of rare disease. So we know the genes underlying the cases of rare disease or uncommon disease of about 3,000 diseases. That's a lot, but there is still a big number of such diseases that we know they are of genetic origin, but we still do not know which is the gene that is altered in those cases. Okay, this is expected to be changed in the next decade. So probably in the next decade we will be able to address or to put our finger on every single gene that is related with every single disease, probably. So that will change the situation dramatically. What can be done now? Of course, when the gene is known, then there is a genetic test available for improving the treatment of patients affected by rare disease. But in the cases where the gene is not known, what we now have available are the tools that are in the area of research. It's not a clinical tool, it's a research tool. But these tools, called next generation sequencing or exome sequencing or other alternatives, these methods can help to identify de novo mutations that are related with such genes.
And what we were talking about before, like personalized medicine versus or plus personalized healthcare. Do you think in the future that will play a main role, the prevention, the preventive medicine? I mean, it's shall we take care of health rather than curing diseases?
I believe it will be like that. I don't know if it will be a decade or maybe 2 or 3 decades, but we will definitely change the paradigm of medicine or healthcare, and I would expect that in the future people without any need, immediate need to visit a medical doctor, to come to a medical doctor to be attended, these people will still have the opportunity to explore what kind of information is contained in their genomes, and they will have the opportunity to see what is the best way to take care of their health when they are healthy and without any health problem. Yeah.
Role of genomics in that field?
I would say it will be crucial because everything is written on our genes. Not everything, but so many genes, so many things are written on our genes that I think it pays to take a look to them.
To that, okay. How about epigenetics?
Yes, of course, on top of genes, we have epigenetics, so it is our experience that it's also very important, but let's not forget that epigenetics is the study of what is on top of genes, but behind genes or below, the genome is there, and that's what brings our main substrate of what will be our health in the future.
Give us some hope, though, because it's to know that it's not everything in the genes, that you have to interact.
Absolutely. What we do in our life is crucial. We should not forget about the environment and the education and our habits. That is very important. And we are not only genes, we are more than genes.
Okay. But you're going to tell us that in our nutrition and a healthy habit of lives and so on, you will tell us what we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, well, maybe if I still like chocolate, I can eat it.
Of course.
Thank you.
Do it. Never stop doing that.
Even if in my genes they say it's not good for me.
Forget about your genes.
Thank you very much, Manuel. Thank you so much. And we also have with us David Jiménez, our David Jiménez. Hola, David. He's working as a neuropsychiatrist. He's a part of the new clinical team that came to accompany the great team that there's always been in ATAM. He's a neuropsychiatrist. He studied in Córdoba? Cádiz. Oh,
medicine.
That's true.
Yeah, Cádiz.
I'm sorry. He studied medicine in Cádiz, but he left very soon to Great Britain, to England, to London in particular. He completed his training career at South London and the Maudsley National Health Services Trust, and worked as a consultant psychiatry in St Thomas Hospital in London, alongside with Dr. Michael Dilly. And he continues to work as a honorary clinical researcher in the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience there in the King's College University in London. He's also an editor of the scientific magazine, which is one of our main magazines that we consult when we are wanting to learn, which is the British Journal of Psychiatry International. His systemic approach to psychiatry and extended experience in clinical research give us a different way of managing mental health problems. He really believes in the patient as a whole. I mean, as a whole. as a person, and his environment, and so that's something that you really, that's where you want to direct your next steps, right? But you've been in London for 14 years. You are very young, and now you come to Spain.
Yeah.
I've been told that you had a quite intensive life in London. Why did you come to Madrid?
Yeah, very intensive. Yeah. First of all, during my medical career, I was kind of challenging, like following on to what Mike Lee was saying, and then Albino, and like this duality of the mind and the brain, So kind of want to do probably kind of like different training, So when I finished medical school, as you said, I ran away to London. But through our medical career, we always building on knowledge, and so I think I got to the point when actually I'm very restless. I'm always seeking something new and something different, and so I was looking for more kind of exciting and challenging landmarks. So one day I came across ATAM through Lola. I was very impressed by all the projects and all the work it's been doing for the last few years and before, and also I believe that right now to improve healthcare we need organizations that don't only focus on concrete interventions or concrete ways of looking at the patients. I think we need to have organizations that have a more humanistic vision about the patients and a more holistic approach to actually to healthcare and the social care, really. And what really got me about ATAM is actually how the use of technology, science, and humanism all together, and approach to healthcare, actually, which is quite innovative and yeah.
You didn't want to wake up, see patients, do some research, and go home or go to have whatever, a beer or something. That's the vision of ATAM that seduced you, the holistic, to see the patient as
a whole,
and to join medicine, humanistics, maybe philosophy, technology, and so on.
Yeah.
So that's
mainly the
nice.
Humanistic approach of the ATAM is fascinating.
Could we say that they were creating a place for you to work?
I think so. You did it.
Well, I have to say that I didn't know David. I just knew him about his curriculum. So, and
I think they did. Yeah.
They did make it for you.
Yeah. I'm very happy.
How are you approaching in ATAM in particular? How are you approaching the genomics applied to mental health?
In ATAM we tend to undertake, we do undertake a very kind of systemic assessment of every single patient. I think it's very important to have a holistic view of the patient and have a very integrated care plan for every single patient. Equally, it's very that's the way we do it. We're not only looking at the person, we're looking at the environment. We're not only looking at the physiological factors. We're looking at the psychosocial situation, the community, the environment, and how actually, like Mike was saying in his talk, how that actually impact on mental health and healthcare, really. But also, now we have a new vision of what human beings can be like, humanity, and I think it's very important to have a different way of thinking, and because that actually we can only focus on just simple science, we have to take into account new science like artificial intelligence and even biology, because what is happening now is going to change the way we're going to be practicing medicine, and actually
this may create a new concept of a human being, you know, and we have to be ready for that. And actually, who's going to change the way we're going to be looking after our patients.
And you were ready for that, and you were seeking for it. Okay, so what's what's the thing you enjoy the most in your, of course, in your the working part of your life, and here in Madrid and in ATAM in particular?
Yeah, I think what I enjoy the most is like, we got an amazing team, very clever people, and actually the opportunity to develop ideas and get appreciated, and actually, there are a lot of ideas and they get developed, and we're working in a lot of projects, and fascinating.
The innovation
part? The innovation,
How about the social?
Oh, of course, it's very important, the whole psychosocial approach to all the problems.
So innovation applied to the psychosocial problems that might have the patients.
Absolutely.
That's the holistic thing you talked about before. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
And I would like to make another question. I don't know who of you would answer, which is, we are working, we already do have some tools for, you were talking, Michael, about different fármacos,
drugs.
Es que lo de drugs queda fatal en español. You were talking about different drugs to treat the same diseases. Sometimes you make a guess and say this is the one for you. Sometimes you don't have to make a guess, but you have some tips that can tell you this will work more on him. But we do it a kind of intuitive way sometimes, and in the clinical, as when you worked 30 years ago and you had to choose, or 20 years ago, and you had to choose between an SRI or another, sometimes it was intuitive to give someone or give the other. And now that's changing, and that's changing in genomics because of genomics. Do you think that's a present because I can explain it to you. We do have we can analyze the genes, and we can guess if one drug is going to work better than other in one patient in particular, and that we can do it right now. But in my clinical practice, I've done it a few times, and I really haven't found the result that I thought I could find. I mean, it wasn't, my expectations were greater than what I had before. Then I'm thinking that even though I'm sure that that's the future, and then in a few years or maybe next year, we will have they will give us the drug that works better for that person. I think it's not the present right now, and I don't like it to be sold as the present if it's not the present.
I mean, I have a pretty strong view on that, which is I kind of agree with you, but I more than agree with you. So almost everything that is, all the promises, the claims about pharmacogenetics today, they're almost all lies. There's one outside of cancer. So I think there's one pharmacogenetic test for an HIV treatment, which is very important but you detect who will get the side effects from it. But people are selling the idea that you can do genetic tests now, and in England it's very tightly regulated, and even there it was abused a bit. But elsewhere, people are telling 23andMe, they're telling people all sorts of nonsense about this test or that test and which drug you should take and which drug you shouldn't take. And you're right, those tests now, in the present, they don't work. They work really, really well for cancer, as I said. And that's the truth today for cancer. And it's been true for many years, actually, for breast cancer, that you do a genetic test, see if somebody's Herceptin positive or negative, give them the drugs that will work or won't work. Outside of that, you're right. There's a promise of that for the future. It's going to be very difficult to do the clinical trials that will prove that the genetic test actually did help. So it's quite a long way before you can prove that using genetics to guide treatment actually gets you better results than the treatment you were going to give anyway. It will come, but it's not here today. I think you're right.
So that's a pity, because I think it's a mistake in the part of the researchers in genetics, or and also Manuel by the enterprises or the industries that are working on that, to try to sell it too soon.
Yes,
and it gives you lots of hope, and there's something that it really doesn't, is not the day today, and it might, I think that there is a mistake, that we might say, hey, this is for nothing, so I will not use it. And probably we will. It will be useful, and it's sad to think that we are criminalizing something because it's not useful right now, and you have given us hopeful tool.
I'll tell you something. I've been lecturing medical students on psychiatric genetics, I think, for 25 years. I've been giving the same lecture for 25 years, and then I put little bits more in, and I take bits out, put more in. And for 25 years, I've been telling them, that medical students, that we'll be able to use genetics to tell people which treatment they'll have. We can't do it yet, but we'll soon be able to do it. And maybe here's a little bit of science. There's a research project that suggests these people respond well to SSRIs, antidepressants, these people don't. And I've had this slide in my talk for 25 years. About a year ago, because my lecture was too long, and because there was all this new knowledge, I was looking, I have to leave something out. And so I left this out. I stopped telling medical students about pharmacogenetics. And I gave the lecture on Monday, so it wasn't too long, and I didn't say anything about pharmacogenetics. And so I think that's right. We shouldn't make promises. We shouldn't claim things that aren't true, because it doesn't earn people's respect.
Did you want to say something, David?
I would like to say actually that in ATAM we also running a number of research projects actually. One of them is in Genómica actually, working with Manuel and with David as well.
So you're working on that to keep on seeing what's happening. What's your opinion about that?
Yes, I must say that I agree completely with your words, because I believe that when we talk about science and healthcare, words should be together with facts, not before facts. And in the case of pharmacogenetics, I'm afraid there are too many words that are not sustained by real facts. Despite, my opinion is that not so far from now we will see reality of pharmacogenetics, and there are some examples. In addition to cancer treatments and HIV treatments, for example, in rare disease, there are, in the case of cystic fibrosis, there is now there are drugs that are available, but they are only indicated in the case that you have a specific mutation. So after the genetic test, a patient will know if he or she can benefit for a specific treatment or not, depending on the kind of mutation that they have. I know this is only a small example, and there are a few others, but I believe that in the next 5 to 10 years we will see more, a big number of examples like this, where pharmacogenetics will become a reality. But I agree that now it is not a reality, a big reality, as sometimes we can see.
I agree absolutely from a clinical point of view. I absolutely agree with that, and this is some hope. Se me ha ido la palabra.
Something that we expect in the future, but not now.
Yeah, and there was something that somehow I want to transmit to the public today, that it doesn't mean it will not work, the fact that it's not working right now. So let's not lose the
Let's not bring false expectations.
Uh-huh.
I would say let's be cautious. Let's take a look first to the scientific evidence and then talk about pharmacogenetics. Yes, that's correct.
But let's not lose the hope that this will someday be
yes.
very useful, very useful.
Absolutely, I agree.
And not only on which treatments are better for this person or for this illness that these persons have, but also for adverse effects. You can do it also with genomics, right? To say some of the side effects are very scary sometimes, and they are very, very unfrequent, but some of them are very scary. So maybe you can say, beware of this person. In this person, there are high probabilities to have this side effect, which is very infrequent in general population. So that's a thing that I think you could do right now, right? For example,
avoid adverse effects. Yeah.
There's an example with clozapine treatments. My understanding is you can do a genetic test that will predict that somebody's at very high risk of losing all their white blood cells if you treat them with clozapine, which is an antipsychotic which we use if people have very severe schizophrenia. But that test, I think that knowledge has been around for a few years, and I only finished my clinical practice a year ago, and we weren't using that test. Now that was a real test, but psychiatrists in Britain weren't using it, even though actually it was perfectly okay. And so I think it's difficult. There can be things that kind of really work, and then that's where the entrepreneur comes in. Is how do you bring it into clinical practice, and then obviously if there's a lot of false claims around, then clinicians they don't know what to believe and what not to believe, and it's difficult. But yes, there are tests that actually do work, a few, but they're not perhaps taken up as quickly as they could be.
And we are talking about present right now.
Yes, right now.
Okay, that's great. That's very hopeful for clinicians. So in the near future, the integration of genomics and neuroscience will represent a major milestone in healthcare.
Absolutely.
David?
Yeah.
Tell us. This is not a yes or no question.
Well,
it's an invitation to talk.
I mean, this is happening.
Everybody gets this.
It's the thing about, I think, genome sequencing, which you refer to as a research technique, in Britain we are trying to introduce it into clinical practice. There's an innovation, a company run by the Department of Health called Genomics England, whose aim is to bring whole genome sequencing into routine clinical practice in the National Health Service in England. And to start that, what they are doing is sequencing 100,000 genomes. And that's NHS patients with a variety of different diagnoses. And to do genome sequencing, to help people think about it, it costs a few hundred euros, maybe 1,000, say 1,000 euros. But it's a test you do once, because somebody's genetic sequence, at any time in their life, it's the same. You do a blood test once, you can do it when they're a baby, you can do it when they're sick, you can do it routinely, and then you have that genome sequence forever. And then whatever you can tell people now, that you have very high risk of cancer, and we can stop that happening. A few people, we can identify that now. You can have regular monitoring. We can stop you getting the cancer that you would certainly have got. We can wait till you get ill, and then we can look up your genome sequence. We can if you're already ill, then we can get the molecular diagnosis. So actually, as medical tests go, it's not that difficult. It's, you know, a brain scan costs the same amount of money. The treatment, the TMS treatment, costs a lot of money. So this is very doable, and actually it's probably going to happen. And the medical profession has a big problem because doctors don't know much genetics, and everybody has a problem. There's going to be a lot of information, but it's going to be information that will be useful and will be usable, and inevitably will impact on kind of every branch of medicine, including mental health and neuroscience and disability and dementia. And this will just be happening anyway. The economics of it are, you know, make it inevitable. It's just kind of what we call, it's common sense that this will be happening.
You only have the common sense when you know what you're talking about. That's something you have pointed something that is really a problem for most clinicians I know, for most doctors I know that work with me. We really don't know much about genetics. Genetics is a world. It's not. I mean, I can do psychiatry without knowing too much traumatology, but I cannot do psychiatry if I don't know a lot of genetics and a lot of pharmacology. That's another one of the issues that we have to be working on. But
well, I would say, like, even though we don't know much, psychiatrists in general, we don't know much about
psychiatrists and many other doctors.
Yeah, but I think we need to start thinking about how much we need to know. You know, but like they were saying before. You know, for example, like the other week, another gene related Parkinson. You know, you were asking me about neuroscience and genomics. You know, every week more genes are coming out. We're finding more and more and more. So we need to be on top of that.
Mm-hmm. We have to learn.
Yeah.
But sometimes genomics is a world, and it has its own language. Sometimes it's hard for me to understand the papers that you write, and I think I'm losing lots of concepts, and I cannot go to the conclusions by myself because I don't really know what you're talking about. So I'd like to know, maybe in England, or because in Spain I know there's being some approaches. Is there a way to help physicians to improve their knowledge about genomics?
Yes, I mean, I think physicians are needing to learn more genetics, and it's interesting. I think in Spain, just a few months ago, you accredited your first training in a specialist clinical geneticist as part of as a medical specialty. So I think one thing that will happen is that doctors and but nurses and psychologists and social workers are all going to learn a lot more and people will know a lot more genetics than they used to. But another thing is that with that enterprise, you can't you have a geneticist and here's your sequence and here's your doctor. But between the raw genetics and the doctor, there's going to be much more of a team of new professionals whose job will be to bring that genetic information to the doctor in a way that's valid and real, but will make it easier for the doctor to be able to interpret it, to be able to talk, and the broadly speaking, the idea of kind of genetic counsellors, people who understand genetics, can speak to doctors and can speak to patients and speak to their families, and somehow this is going to be a new job. And if you have children wondering what kind of university degree they should do, what kind of work they should specialise in, I can tell you the world is going to need a hell of a lot of people who can understand genetics and then explain it to doctors and patients and families as well. So that will be part of the enterprise, certainly.
That's great. And Manuel, as our Spanish entrepreneur, what would you do to help us?
Yes, indeed. I must say that we were aware a few years ago that the amount of information related with genetics and genomics is so big that medical doctors need to update and acquire this knowledge for their practice. Not necessarily thinking in specialist in genetics, but thinking in any medical doctor who wants to know what's new in this area, what can be used. So that's why 5 years ago we started a collaboration between the University of Valencia and other universities and the Institute of Genomic Medicine to organize a master course that can be taken for a complete year or can be taken for short courses to update knowledge. And in parallel with that, we created 2 years ago a magazine that is unfortunately right now all in Spanish, called Genética Médica News. And this magazine, what we do is something very simple. We explore the literature, we extract the most relevant parts of recently published articles, and we write it in a simple way to tell a medical doctor what is related with what is the relation between this gene and that disease. And so this journal now, after 2 years, has been distributed. It is freely accessible, and it's a tool that I recommend to any medical doctor.
To medical doctors and maybe social workers,
Also,
nurses.
yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you think that it's
healthcare professional? Yes.
Health professional. How about general public?
Well, I must say that the level of this magazine is done or written thinking in healthcare professionals. Although it is done in a simple format, many patient organizations also read it because it is freely accessible, and indeed we receive requests of what is new about this disease or that gene, and we help all of them to access the information that they may need.
You think that if people is interested and has a short background on what's happening in a determined disease, they would be able to... It can be used, yeah. It can be useful.
It's published daily.
Okay, so now we're getting out of time, and I'd like you to give us in a nutshell, your conclusions, David. Your message. Your message.
I think. Well, message. Yeah, DNA is coming at you. You know, This is all happening, and I think. I mean, just to pick up on that last point about the sort of general public, it's for me thinking about what I need to say and how can I put it in language people will understand. It's obvious to me that everybody knows far more genetics than they knew a couple of years ago and 5 years ago and 10 years ago. And just as we know about the internet, we know about everybody knows more human biology and genetics than they used to. So I think that information is kind of coming into society, and it'll be something that at the level of society, genetics will become much more part of what being human is about. So that is just kind of like happening. But I don't have anything particular to say apart from that.
What's your conclusion, Manuel?
All right. I'd like to take a part of the ideas that we had during our interaction. I would say very simple words. We are all made of genes, but we are more than genes.
That's a nice one. Thank you. How about you, David? What are your conclusions?
I think that, from a personal point of view, I think genomics is gonna change the way we're gonna be practicing medicine within the next 5-10 years. That's why we in ATAM, we actually, as I said before, we are quite focusing on this research project with Manuel and David, also Hayward Williams, who will be coming to futuros singulares. It's going to change the way we're going to practice psychiatry and the way we actually going to be thinking about neuropsychiatry and neuroscience as well.
So
for a number of reasons that we don't know yet.
This is the present and the future, and ATAM is going to write it.
No, we're going to do it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much for your assistance. Thank you very much for your very interesting opinions and your knowledge. And it's an honor, as I said before, to be here with you. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Lola.
It's an honor.
Gracias.
De nada. And now we are going to go to the next presentation. I'll say goodbye to the Thank you.